Hey, everyone. Welcome to Locked On Lakers for Friday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky. Gabe Vincent is back and feeling healthy. What does his return do for the Lakers this season? That's next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, no matter how or where you get your podcasts. This one's always going to be free. It's never going to be behind a paywall. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go hang out with over 25,000 subscribers to the channel, Andy, all of whom are excited to see the Lakers play basketball tonight. I know you were in El Segundo on Thursday for practice. Not a ton of clarity necessarily on whether or not LeBron and AD are going to play tonight, whether they play Sunday. They will play at some point in these pair of games in Palm Springs. But the preseason is kicking off this evening, and so we will talk a little bit about what we want to see in these games, the 6 games that they play between now and the beginning of the regular season. We'll get into more notes about the attention to detail and what this means. It, again, appeared in a variety of ways, talking to players and JJ Redick. On Thursday, do want to let people know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. We spoke, was it for Wednesday or Thursday? I forget, about Christie, Andy. And in some ways, for a team that didn't bring in a lot of external changes, one of the big internal improvements is taking a guy who didn't impact the team last year, really, and giving him a place where he might. Becomes almost like a free agent signing. The same can be said for Gabe Vincent and his return to the rotation. He was expected to do a lot of things for the team last year and obviously couldn't. So, again, you were in El Segundo on Thursday, and he was a major topic of conversation.
Yeah, first of all, I also want to let people know really quickly that other than Jared Vanderbilt and Christian Wood, who we both know, everyone knows, are recovering from their respective surgeries, it does not sound like Cam Reddish is going to be available, certainly for Friday, but I'm not even sure about for the full weekend of games. JJ Redick said that he's participating in practice, but he did not do a live scrimmage on Thursday. So it was not spelled out that Reddish couldn't play, but just in terms of expectations, mine are that he will not be playing. So just in terms of people to be aware of that.
For all you Reddish heads out there who are tuning in for your preseason Cam Reddish satisfaction.
Yeah, it's the preseason. You're already getting in your shots. Good work, Brian.
I'm just wondering who these people are. Like the people who are like planning their Friday night and are actually now potentially going to alter their plans because they know Reddish might not be available.
It might be the Reddish family. Who knows? But as far as Vincent, he is healthy. He's been participating in a lot of different stuff. And last season, his absence exacerbated issues for this team in a lot of different ways. It made it so Jalen Hood-Schifino's both lack of readiness and then not being available at all for much of the season, it put it into focus because they needed somebody off the second unit to be able to do some of those point guard duties, to play that sort of role. JJ Redick talked about how he has not spent a ton of time with Redick, although they did have about a 3-hour conversation in Vegas.
With Vincent, you mean? Yeah.
Excuse me, with Vincent during Summer League. But Vincent's made a really strong impression on him so far.
One of the things I just talked about with him is just having a really aggressive mentality. He is, and I knew this prior to him being back in the gym, I knew that he was super professional. Rob talked about that when I got the job. He's like, we have a lot of these guys. I feel very fortunate, but he's like one of those guys where you're like, man, I'd love to have 10 Gabe Vincents. He's easy to coach. You know what he's going to be day to day, consistency. consistency. So for the performance side, in terms of on-court production and all that, I think the biggest thing for him is just having a really aggressive mentality. Don't turn down shots. You're coming off an action, your first shot, shoot a three. And I think for him specifically, I think just creating that level of freedom and clear-mindedness is important.
I also asked Gabe where he thought he was missed the most last year, and his response was interesting. He actually said just his voice. And I hadn't even thought about the fact that when he was doing a lot of his rehab and trying to get right, there would be long road trips or even home games where he wasn't there. You know, this is very typical when players are injured, they're working on something else. But, you know, he plays at a position that you often look towards for leadership or just on-court intelligence, observing things. You know, he plays a role where you're often orchestrating and in charge of things on the court. And I haven't even thought about just the idea of, you know, it's another set of eyes that this team didn't benefit from in games.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's when you're missing your backup point guard, like you say, creates real problems. And I also, you know, for this year, when you talk about this continuity the Lakers have, I mean, it would be nice if they had a little bit more continuity with Vincent. And, you know, like they had a full dossier on the most effective ways he can be used with this particular group, you know, and because it varies depending on who guys are playing with. And so they don't have that. And so for the Lakers playing, you know, Vincent, for example, is a really important part. When you talk about things that are, you know, you want to see in the preseason, I want to see Gabe Vincent. I want to see how he looks. Like, can they, even when LeBron and AD don't play, like, can they approximate Vincent's role in preseason games to something that is going to be similar to what he's going to be doing in the regular season, and then figure out how he can be optimized? Because he's one of these guys I thought, you know, hearing Redick use that term, like really professional, I think that's good. I don't think he's spectacularly good at any one thing, but he's a player that coaches like. He's not terrible at anything. He is very predictable in his effort and his presence and all these things. He's going to be something that you know exactly what you're going to be getting from him. And, you know, I'm not convinced he's going to be a floor spacer like some people said when he was signed, you know, based on that playoffs that he had, you know.
You clearly, Brian, did not see the video I tweeted out of him at the tail end of practice working on his corner threes.
I know it's
drained
true.
them all, baby.
I am convinced that if you put me in that setting, like somehow there's something magical about shooting 3-pointers at the end of practice that makes all of them seem to go in.
It ain't that magic, Brian.
It's not that magical.
Particularly when D'Lo has a hand in your face, even, you know, lackadaisically, you're absolutely
people
not.
I mean, corner threes maybe, but like if you ever get a chance to stand out at a pro 3-point line, like that extra 2 feet or whatever, it's like an ocean. It's like I have to throw the ball overhand to get the ball near the back.
I remember one time, I don't remember how it happened or whatever, but after a Laker game, for some reason, a bunch of us went out on the floor and started shooting. And A, you are correct. Like just seeing that line, I was like, damn, that is far. B, I made one. And I was so thrilled. I don't think I shut up about it for like a month. I was so.
Well, it's also too like it when you know you're 5'8", I'm 5'9", so like when you're 6'8", that difference isn't such. You're like, you know, your scale relative to the distance is like regular, like college 3-pointers or like high school 3-pointers. I'm like, that's pretty far away from me. But anyway, like I need to see. You know, Vincent's track record as a 3-point shooter broadly is not necessarily great, but that's okay. Like the question is, and we'll come back to this after the break. Vincent is very, you know, he is a role player, and one of the things that I think everyone is curious about is how well does Redick scheme. You know, you heard him talking that clip. You know, when you come off a screen, be aggressive. You know, look for your shot, things like that. But how well does he create rotations, create game plans, create schemes that protect his role players and optimize them? And, Vincent is going to be a perfect example of that. I realize people roll their eyes when Lakers analysts sound like homers and say, but we didn't have Gabe Vincent. And that's true. Like, they weren't going to win a title last year if Vincent was around, but it screwed things up. And, they were really thin at point guard. And that made a difference putting a league average player in that position is a big deal. Like it just is. And so I want to talk a little bit more about that and get into this question of JJ Redick in detail a little bit more next.
Locked on Lakers is brought to you by Game Time. My daughter is in 8th grade. We have bonded a lot over the years through music. Right now it's Frank Ocean. She is absolutely obsessed with Frank Ocean. He has not put out an album in about 8 years. And she's heard rumors, though, that he's back in the studio, which could mean new album, new tour. And I said, if he does go out again, I will get us tickets, which I know would be difficult to get unless I was using Game Time, in which case it's easy because they streamline the process with new features like Game Time Picks, which filters out all of the confusing verbiage and just gives you incredible deals on great seats. It saves you time. Like JJ Redick designed the whole process. It offers panoramic seat views before you buy the tickets, so you know exactly what the view to the stage will be. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off.
Yeah, obviously this question of efficiency and attention to detail has been a major theme for the Lakers and JJ Redick early in training camp, really going back to last week when we heard from Pelinka and Redick himself. He was asked today, Thursday afternoon in El Segundo, about they've got an offense to install, they've got a defense to install. Is it possible when you are that detail oriented, potentially even to overload players? And Redick responded to that question.
I think for all our guys, that has not been a concern, to be honest with you, because we're being very deliberate with installs. To me, the bigger, not concern, the bigger point of emphasis is just being really attentive to the details in everything that we're doing. Whether that's a pick and roll strategy, our body positioning on off-ball splits, the timing of things on offense, our positioning on offense, all of those things, getting our screening angles right. That's more the concern than trying to install an entire system in 3 weeks.
So what I think is really interesting about a lot of these things and these clips that we keep hearing, I know you have a few more of them, D'Lo talked about details and things like that. What really is what we're getting into, the essence of this is communication and how well he communicates expectations, roles, things like that. And I think, the consensus early, again, all the caveats of new coaching staff, certain players weren't happy with the last one. Everyone says nice things about the new guys. All of that established, there does seem to be a strong sense that this group communicates very well and communicates very clearly. So there was a clip from earlier this week where it was seen kind of as this back and forth between Redick and a member of the local beat, and kind of Redick maybe picking on this guy, the media for the questions that they're asking. It was asked about whether or not this is gonna be the year Rui takes the next step. Can you get Rui to take the next step? And Redick's response was, "What is that? What is the next step? You tell me what that is." And as they say, well, no, I'm asking you. It's not my job. You tell me what the. And the whole point of it was, again, it's not so much was it a good question, was it a bad question. What I thought was interesting about it and relates to these types of things when he talks about offensive installs, defensive installs, things like that. Take the next step is not feedback. That is not instruction. It's not coaching. Later in that clip, he talked about we want him to rebound. If you're talking about rebounding more, defense, things like that, those are instructions. Those are things, like tangible things. I want you to go out. We're going to work on, in this case, maybe with Rui, corner crashing. We're going to change the way that you position your body on screens, to use an example from the clip we just heard from Redick. Whatever these things might be, those things are tangible coaching, feedback, instruction things. And so I suspect that when he talks to his players, he's not going to answer questions. He's not going to answer questions in the context of what is the next, like taking the next step. We think Rui can take that next step, which is essentially just a cliche. I suspect he's not communicating with his players with that language either. I think in the Habs, like, we can make Rui a better player, but I'm going to tell him how we're going to make him a better player. We're going to design things and communicate with him and everyone else things that will make that. And then in the end, we're all going to look up and say, wow, Rui, quote unquote, took the next step. And so that's what I thought was interesting about that exchange, was that I think to me, it reflects on how I suspect he communicates with his players. And coaches, just as they use cliches with us, are prone to using it with players as well. And I feel like the more the raving that we seem to be getting from players about communication early on is probably founded a lot in that. Like, he's telling us stuff. He's not giving us platitudes. He's not giving us cliches. He's giving us clear expectations that we can work with.
Yeah, I do think it does reflect what is likely going to be at times from Redick, a bit of pairing these type of questions, looking for these semantics, challenging people on wording. I think in part because JJ Redick seems like a very, specific, attention detailed person in all aspects of his life. I also think he is often described as both competitive and arrogant. And I think there can be, if there's an opportunity for him to lord intelligence over people, he's probably going to do it. And honestly, it's fine. I mean, it reminds me a bit of, you and I covered Kobe for 10 years. And something that you and I both appreciated about him was he would often, if he thought a question was stupid, make it very clear, this is a stupid question.
Yeah, it's tough to be on the wrong end of that. Happened a few times.
But
look, the end result is you consider the questions you're going to ask him.
Yes.
And you ask better questions.
I was going to say, sometimes I think that would be Kobe was just in a bad mood after a bad game, by the team, a loss, whatever, and he's just not in the mood for a post-game scrum. But I think some of it was, and again, this was something we both appreciated about him, he wanted to know that you understood why you were asking the question in the first place. Like, do you have a clear reason for doing it? Are you actually wondering about something, or are you looking to just get a clip, like just some sort of sound clip from me? Is there a reason you're asking this question? And in this case, with Redick talking about the proverbial next step with Rui, I imagine that I'll speak for myself, not this media member. If I was defining the next step for Rui, it would be more attention and consistency with rebounding and defense. I think if you had phrased it that specifically to Redick, he likely would not have turned it on its head or attempted to parry it or whatever, because I think if nothing else, he would appreciate the specificity, and he's also, Redick is, at least in, both of us have not spent a ton of time around him, but he seems to be somebody that is both up for the debate and also not up for the BS at all.
BS or is a cliche? Either one. But go on. Yeah.
I mean the BS of the theater and like the.
Oh, I see what you mean. Right.
Like some of the BS that goes along with, I don't know, for lack of a better word or phrase, coaching in the public eye. There's a lot of different levels and definitions of BS, but caught a lot of people's attention when Redick named his starting lineup before media day, much less before the season began, which is very unusual Like most coaches guard this stuff like they're the nuclear codes or something, like the fate of Western civilization rests on your opponent not learning your starting lineup until 45 minutes before game time, which is ridiculous. I asked Redick why he just went the opposite route of most of these coaches.
Or why not? I guess. I mean, it's Chris Finch is going to get my starting lineup before the game. He's going to have a general idea. We're going to play them in the preseason. Like I don't care. I mean, we're going to have the same lineup in game 10 if we're healthy. We're going to have the lineup in game 20. Like I'm not. I mentioned the other day envisioning a 9-man rotation in the regular season. I hope you guys know this. Like I'm open-minded to everything, and I think one of the greatest things that I learned from all the coaches that I played for that I really appreciated, particularly Coach K, is you always have to be adaptable as a player, as a coach. So that's what we're going to go with. I don't need to hold that as a secret. It's not a big deal.
It's just unusual because a lot of coaches go the opposite route. So I was just curious if there was a philosophical.
The other thing is just creating clarity for the players. I mean, that's something that I know I valued as a player.
After the break, I want this clip with the Rui thing, and even your point, Andy, about sort of the wordsmithing and being a little pedantic and the ego and the sort of the issues like with this the being a little pedantic, I would say, with that question about centers when he spoke with media. I still think even that really gets to his approach and what he values, and I will explain what I mean next.
Locked on Lakers is brought to you by FanDuel. NFL fans, you can enjoy the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Let's just say you're watching a game and it feels like you are predicting everything before it happens. You just got a real feel for how this thing is going to play out, but you just want to confirm that you're correct before you lay down a little scratch. You can actually check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you would be placing your bets with FanDuel. Everything is streamlined, and you get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And we can't wait. 24-25 NBA season is kicking off very soon. Our friends at FanDuel have options for you as of this recording. The Lakers 35-1 to win the title. Anthony Davis 150-1 for MVP. He's also 25-1 for Defensive Player of the Year. Dalton Connect 10-1 for Rookie of the Year, and Max Christie 150-1 for Most Improved Player. That's FanDuel.com.
You talked about that potential sort of ego thing, the intellect, and all that. I think you're probably right. I think he is a smart guy, and Phil used to do that. Phil Jackson used to do that kind of thing a lot. Like pointing out, well, what do you define your terms? What are we talking about? Like, and Phil, while extremely brilliant as a very smart guy, is also just a gigantic ego. I mean, to say the least. But like, it's when you followed up with Redick and he's okay, other coaches do that differently. He's like, yeah, but there's also the issue of clarity for players. That kind of thing. It's like, first and foremost, what do I value? I value clarity and clear, efficient communication above all. And yeah, is there a little bit of value that comes from the quote unquote training camp battles and like guys having to earn it and all this? Sure, if that's a real thing for your roster. And on this team, it's not, especially when Vanderbilt isn't going to be in position to really compete for that fifth starting spot. So just, if you know that, and surely Redick did and does, don't do the kabuki theater of pretending that there are open competitions for spots where they're not, because players don't like that. They don't appreciate it because they either know they're being BS'd or they're going to find out they're being BS'd. Neither is good. And so even like the thing with the centers, when he says, when he's asked the question about, do we need a traditional center? Do the Lakers need a traditional center? And he turns the question around. What are we talking? What is a traditional center? I agree with you. He was being evasive and pedantic and all these other things.
Especially when the Lakers off the record confirmed to Eric Pincus was asking the question. Yeah, we're looking for the type of player Eric was asking about.
And he was put in a position, we talked about this last week, the Everydayers, remember, of having to answer a question. It was very difficult for the head coach to answer. It was a question for the GM. But it's still, even that is reflective of what, use language that is precise. Classic center, whatever, is not precise. Are you talking about a back to the basket, low post player who, is, really big or whatever? Are you talking about? Like, what are you talking about? And so even that I see as reflective, especially in light of the Rui clip that we played earlier, of a sort of obsessiveness with language, and words have meaning. And I'm going to always try to pick the most precise words and the most useful words for the situation and for the instruction or the meaning I'm trying to convey, which I think is good, because coaches shouldn't be able to get away with poor communication either.
Of course. And the truth is that hanging on to precision with your words may also not be utilized in the exact same way for the exact same reasons with his team versus with us. Like, sure, of course. Again, there is a either defensiveness or combativeness or haughtiness, however you want to put it, that may come up when dealing with certain questions from media. And I say this not as being critical of Redick. Like, I don't expect coaches of any kind to be 100% transparent, nor to 100% enjoy the experience of dealing with us. I'm not looking for a bestie. It's fine as long as you're not.
I am. I just don't expect it to be him.
Right. As long as you don't genuinely make it difficult for us to do the job, or you're being disrespectful in ways that really starts seeping into unprofessionalism, I honestly don't care one way or the other. What really matters, though, is the way he lays out these details for the players, how he goes about doing it, how you go about building the eventual full systems that Redick talked about earlier, that eventually they're going to get into, but he thinks it would be crazy, and he's right to try to make everyone learn it all in like 3 weeks. But what I also think, and play this this clip in a second from D'Angelo Russell, the enthusiasm that these guys keep talking about in terms of just learning all of this and the approach to giving you more information in ways that, forget whether or not it's overloading the players, actually seems exciting to them. Like, they are excited at the idea of things being more sophisticated, more complicated. Yeah, it's something we have to learn, but this is really cool what we are learning. This was something D'Lo talked about after today's practice.
Since you came back, I've heard you talk about IQ and a lot, and thinking the game as well. Have you enjoyed kind of the level of minutia you guys can get into?
Hell yeah.
With this, with what's going on here in camp?
I mean, yeah, it excites me because I haven't really had the opportunity to. I'm not throwing shots at anybody. Obviously, I know it kind of spins like that, but I've never really had the opportunity to build a relationship with a coach over a long period of time. Most recently was Finch in Minnesota, and it was great. We got to the playoffs. We started doing really well. And obviously, the business of the basketball side works out. But for me to see how JJ's trying to bring the play calls and just level of IQ into each practice art, in each film session, whatever it may be, you can see he's prioritizing that. And I've always been a guy that wanted to prioritize high IQ, high verbiage, high film sessions. Like, let's rise to that. And he's obviously doing it. So, like I said, it's something to look forward to.
Playing on that, the other day, he said that 2 of the 3 ATOs that he ran out in practice ended up being successful. I mean, is that something that you look to? Like, is that like a coach's bag, so to speak?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I'm speaking on. I mean, yesterday, he drew up a play, and I don't even know if it worked. I think Jackson did a great job of sniffing the play out, but I was on the golf course and I was thinking about it, and I sent JJ a little voice note kind of thanking him for putting that out. I never seen it. I'm not trying to hype it up, but I thanked him for showing me that, and obviously it didn't work, but I saw like him getting into his bag right there, and it's exciting for players that kind of know this stuff.
Players like being knowing that something is these guys have seen a lot of stuff. You get in the 10th year in the league, you play even a guy who only played a year in college, you're playing AAU, you've seen a lot of things on a whiteboard. So to encounter things that do feel a little bit different. It's not just Lakers fans, I think, that are hoping that improved coaching can make a difference this year. More coherence, more whatever the word adjective you want to use can make it. The players hope it too. And as D'Lo says, not everything they say that's nice, that's different, that seems elevated by this team is a shot at Darvin or a shot at Vogel. Sometimes some things are just like, wow, these people do this really well. Those guys were good. These guys are just really good, whatever it might be. And we got a long way to go. But I think, it does keep people engaged when they feel like they're doing something that is a step above perhaps maybe what they've been doing previously.
Real quick before we go, tonight's game, who are you most curious to see out there?
I think it's guys like somebody like Vincent. The format, everybody's going to focus on Bronny and Connect and those like that. But we're not totally sure the role that somebody like Connect is going to play. We know Bronny's not going to play a role in the rotation. Things I want to see Vincent. I want to see Christie, guys like that we know were not there last year that are there this year. I think that to me is what I'm looking for. You?
JHS. We just have not seen him play basketball in a long time. And I recognize last season, most of the times you saw him play, you didn't like what you saw, but he's been really talked up a lot, often unprompted. So very curious to see what that looks like.
And again, you talk about something that makes a huge difference in what the Lakers can do, both with their rotation and with their transaction potential. Having Jalen Hood-Schifino be a viable rotation player does huge things for this rotation. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go hang out and see the show and talk to us, talk to over 25,000 subscribers. Make another Locked On podcast your second listen of every day. Perhaps the Locked On NBA podcast. You can see more of us there and really catch up with what's going on in the league before the season starts. We will potentially check in after these games, these preseason games, but certainly we'll be back on Monday. Have a great weekend.